Our subject is what is the knowledge obtained by a great devotee with all the divine qualities, with one-pointed mind, devotion, who is very dear to Lord the Absolute. So yesterday we were discussing the exact difference between the physical body. The body is taken as the field, but body also is a complicated word. It has different meanings. So mainly it is taken by the philosophers who have seen it, experienced it. They have taken it as three different bodies. One is physical, other is the individual self, which is not physical, different from the physical body, and the third is the root cause of all these two bodies, that is causal body. We discussed so much on these three bodies. Now we are discussing how there is difference between the physical body and the individual self, which is called as Jivatma, or the individual self, the spirit. In different terms it is expressed by different seers from different angles. So we were discussing the difference between the physical body and the individual self, which abides in this physical body. So yesterday we saw, in the state of liberation wherein there is annihilation of the mind. Mind belongs to the physical body. Physical body, of course, a body means a group. So this physical body includes the body, the senses, mind, intellect, and also the ego and subconscious mind, and prana, the vital energy. Everything belongs to the physical body. And how this individual self is composed, it is, of course, a part of physical body is there. That means the ego will be there, and it will have a subtle body. That is also the definition of individual soul. Subtle body, gross body, physical body. The subtle body is known as the individual self. Subtle body means it has also a body. It is a group that is subtler than this gross body. So some aspects in the subtle form is there in the subtle body. Subtle body is composed by eightfold objects, that is subtler objects. The subtle body includes the ego will be there. I am so and so. I am the subtle body. Ego has to be there. And five tanmatras, that means the 5 subtle units of 5 gross elements, that is sky, air, fire, water and earth. All these are grosser to the, in comparison with the units, just as the meter is grosser than the centimeter. By centimeter we measure the meter, and by the meter, the meter is grosser than the centimeter. In comparison with kilometer, our meter is the unit, so it changes. In this way, the 5 units, that is the form which is perceived by the sense eyes, all these 5 senses of knowledge, Roop, Ras, Roop, Sabda, Sparsa, Roop, Ras, Gandha. Sabda is sound that is perceived by the ear, and that is the smaller unit of the sky. When the sky is measured, it is measured by sound only. In other words, we can easily say sky is nothing but expansion of the sound. Everywhere in all parts of the sky there will be sound. Just as in the meter, everywhere we can see the millimeters and centimeters, all these are there in the meter. Similarly, the sound is the smaller unit of the sky, and the form is the smaller unit of the the form is smaller unit of the object which has a form. It is seen by, perceived by the eyes, and the nose, smell, and the skin, touch, and the tongue perceive the taste. These 5 units, smaller, minute units, and the prana, the movement will be there in the subtle body. It is not steady. And of course the intellect or mind, whatever you call it, in the subtle form, and the ego, the mind, prana and ego. Ego constitutes the subconscious mind also. Mind also intellect and everything, decisive power. And these 3 and these 5 together 8-fold body. So it is called Puryastak, the body of 8. Subtle body is known that like that, and carrying body also, the carrier body. 8 Prana is there, it is not steady, it is not movementless, it moves in the subtle regions, subtle realms. And that's how after the death the subtle body remains and it travels in the subtler planes. It is never destroyed when the gross body is destroyed. And gross body destroys means that is death. By that all these five gross elements they dissolve in their sources. But the subtle body yet remains, and subtle body carries all the impressions, because the ego with subconscious mind is there present, so all the impressions are there. It carries from one aspect to the other aspect. That means in the subtler planes, it also in a subtle way it enjoys pain and pleasure, but not as the gross body enjoys. Gross body has gross senses, subtle body has subtle senses. So it enjoys pain and pleasure, but in a different way. So all these are called subtle body or the individual soul, that is different from the gross body, and that is what we were discussing. When one physically suffers, the other never suffers like that, because it is different from each other. Gross bodies are different. And what about the subtle body? Subtle body, sometimes it identifies itself with the causal body and the universal body, and sometimes it forgets it, and it identifies itself other than the universal body. So it holds that identity different from the universal body. Universal body means the cosmic body, cosmic one. In this way there are some differences. Yesterday we saw, in the state of liberation, wherein there is annihilation of the mind. Annihilation of mind means the gross mind with intellect, gross intellect. There is no ignorance, and the play of the two currents of likes and dislikes does not exist there. A false perception, ignorance, pleasure and pain, doubt, bondage, delusion, sorrow, etc., where the essential properties of the self, just as heat is the essential property of the fire. That is also known as nature, swabhava. The essential property of fire is heat. It cannot be separated from the fire. They could not be got rid of at any time. But there have been sages of self-realization in the past, like Sankara, Dattatreya, Jadabharat. So many examples are there. Yajnavalkya, who possessed extraordinary supersensual or intuitional knowledge, who were free from false perception, doubt, fear, delusion, sorrows, etc. False perception means perception which doesn't exist for long, doesn't last long. That is by the gross senses. That is called false perception, momentary perception. That is what we are discussing as the informative knowledge, informations only. Some data, periodical data, which is not always same. So that changes. That is how it is called false perception. And they are always subject to doubt, fear, delusion, confusion, sorrow, pain and pleasure, all these. They were not conscious of samsara. Who? They means all these great real-head souls. They were not conscious of samsara, this worldly, this gross perceptionary process. But they had perfect awareness of the self. Here the self means the Supreme Self. Therefore, we will have to conclude that the self is ever free, that the Supreme Self is ever free, pure, perfect, eternal, and that ignorance inheres in the instrument and not in the self. Instrument means the mind. Mind including senses, gross senses, and intellect, etc. All these ignorance means false perception that belongs to the mind. Mind is an instrument only. It is not the doer, not anything important. And this mind, yesterday we were talking of Hanuman, this mind, it is always a changing aspect. This mind becomes gross, this mind becomes very subtle, that takes the form of intellect, and that also takes the form of ego, subconscious mind. That's how this mind is known as fourfold mind. Mind only. Just as while writing something, the children, they go on repeating the same, say A. If you write once, they will not remember it. They will go on writing A on the same form again and again. That becomes gross. So subtle when it is repeated, that becomes gross. This is how the gross world is. The subtle aspects are repeated again and again, infinitely, then it becomes gross. Sometimes if the falsehood is repeated again and again by yourself, you think you are right. The mistakes are repeated again and again, that becomes correct. This is how we have been experiencing this gross world to be true. Anything is repeated, that becomes gross, and that takes a form and some solid impression on the body, that means in the mind, that means also in the subconscious mind. They are called impressions or memories, which are not destroyed by destruction of the body, gross body. That remains. Just as we write something, say in the pencil on the white paper, and if you rub out the line, yet the impression that fold is there, it will be visible, but in a subtle way. And even that is pressed strongly in microscope, you can see that yet there will be some marks where you have written something. And when the ink is deleted sometimes, and you apply spirit or something else, and you look by microscope, you will see the impressions. You can see it clearly. In this way, impressions are always there in the subconscious mind, that is subtle mind, subtlemost mind. And from other angle, it is taken as the storehouse of all the seeds. Seeds are the impressions, just as the different future trees are present in the present seed. They are not visible. You cannot see them by microscope even, but impression is there. When the favorable conditions are available, those impressions take a gross form. That is called germination of the seed. When the favorable conditions are available, that prompts the potency to take a gross form and multiply. Multiplication is the nature's law. And that's how all the misunderstanding, all the confusion is seen, whether it is one or many. In this way, all these doubts and fear, when there is two, there will be fear because of dependency, because of relationship, because of comparison. Naturally, there will be fear. And of course, when one is appeared, then there is fear of disappearance. So that fear, that is called fear of death. Whatever you have taken as you are, that is going to change. That change is cause for the fear. So in this way, confusion and the pairs of opposites, when you feel pleasure, naturally you have to feel pain also. Where there is light, there is darkness also. Without comparison, we don't understand anything by our gross mind. In this way, all these ignorance, that is doubt, fear, delusion, and false perception, all these belong to the mind, gross mind, not to the self. Self here also you should not be confused. Self is taken as the essential central point of the whole thing. So when it is a comparative term. When it is taken as the Supreme Self, then there is no comparison. It is only one. But the same self, when it is compared, it changes its meaning. When the senses are compared with the body, they are subtler than the body, more powerful than the body, they are controller of the body. So senses are called self when compared with the body. Similarly, mind is self when compared with the senses. In the same way, intellect will be self when compared with the mind and body and other things. So the meaning of the self changes. Don't be confused. You have to understand in what context the self word is used. It is used in different ways, in different context. Here we are discussing about the Supreme Self, which is beyond all these comparisons and ignorance, and it is always pure. Pure means one, no adulteration, and it is perfect. Perfect means it is one. One is perfect. Two means it is divided, there is gap, there is change, there is comparison, everything. So one is perfect always, and eternal also, continuous, eternal, and that ignorance inheres in the instrument mind only and not in this self. Supreme Self is one, the absolute presence, so that is beyond all these. Ignorance born of tamas acts as a veil and prevents man from knowing his essential nature as the existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute. Why the Supreme Self is not experienced by everyone? That is to be clearly understood. You see, if it causes this tamas, ignorance, born of tamas, acts as a veil. Veil is called tamas, which hides the thing and prevents man from knowing his essential nature as the existence absolute, knowledge absolute, bliss absolute. It causes perception of what is quite the contrary of truth. We have to understand what is perception and what is truth, and causes doubt or non-perception of truth. Truth is hidden, so it is not perceived, and that's how the doubts are created. As soon as knowledge of the self dawns, these three forms of ignorance vanish. Three forms of ignorance, three qualities. That is sattva, rajas, tamas. Three qualities. All the three are the enveloping characteristics. It prevents you to see the reality. But sattva is finer than rajas. Rajas is finer than the tamas. Tamas is total darkness and total ignorance. In night also sometimes we see something, some objects we can see haphazardly. We can guess what is there. That is not full tamas. So there is difference always in these qualities. As soon as knowledge of the self dawns, these three forms of ignorance vanish into two. Therefore, these three forms of ignorance are not the attributes of the self. Attribute means the properties or the qualities. They belong to the mind only. Mind means emotion. It is not one. Mind is always known as the flow of thought waves. Thoughts are waves only. And waves means it is imbalanced state of something. Of what? Which is balanced, that only is going to be imbalanced. Which is short, that becomes tall. Growth always is seen in ignorance. That is why the reality is not known. Everything, all the names and forms are subject to growth and change. Change is called growth and decay, both. So all these subtle aspects of the nature also should be understood, then only we can go beyond the nature. They belong to all these attributes. They belong to the mind only, because it is always changing. So it takes different forms. The organ or the instrument. Mind is only an effect or a product of ignorance. What is called ignorance? Now we have to understand thoroughly. Ignorance means not the knowledge. What is knowledge? We have seen. One is perceptional knowledge, which is always changeable. That's how we don't see the reality. When you are going in a fast vehicle, can you read what is written in the side signboards or milestones? Because you are changing your position, so you cannot read clearly. And whatever is there side road, by the side road, you cannot see properly. This movement causes the ignorance. When you are steady at one point, not changing, then everything becomes clear. That is called clarity, that is called knowledge, proper knowledge. That's how movement is ignorance. And this mind is nothing but a moving aspect. It is a vibration. It is the waves of, waves are called thoughts, thought waves. So it is ever changing. So that's how it covers up the reality. you are unaware of the reality. We always give the example of two fast trains crossing each other in different directions. Two friends are sitting in both the trains. Can they recognize each other? Why? What is the cause? Because of the movement. If both the trains, they are standing at the platform steadily, then they can talk to each other, they can recognize each other. That is called knowledge, clarity. And when there is speed, there is movement, that causes the veil, means an envelope. When you get a letter in the envelope, do you know what is the matter written in the envelope letter? Unless and until you tear out the envelope and throw it out and go through the letter, you cannot understand what is the matter inside. So, always you have to remove the veil, then only you can see the clear, distinctly, clearly the reality. Unless this mind, always moving mind, becomes one-pointed, you cannot understand what is hidden underneath. And that is called the real self, which is not known to the mind, a moving vehicle. In this way, mind is the product of ignorance. It is ignorance itself. And this mind, when becomes steady, the mind, existence of mind is there. Existence is all-pervading. Mind does exist, but not in movement, but in a steady pose. That is called one-pointed mind. That is what we were discussing in last chapter, 12th chapter. Who is dear to the Lord? Who has got all these divine qualities, what we have discussed already, which leads the mind to be one-pointed. Or else that devotion is not pure devotion, it is changing from one to the other, so that is not liked by, or it is not dear to the Absolute One, Absolute Truth, the Supreme Self. That we have already discussed. The same mind becomes one, then it is not called mind, it is the truth. And if it starts moving, then it takes all these forms, just like the chameleon changes its color in different seasons. The same person takes different forms while acting some different roles in a drama or in cinema or in other actions. The same person becomes a teacher at the school, he is the head of the family, father of some children at home. When he goes to the market, he becomes a customer, a purchaser. In this way, when he goes to the bank, he changes his aspect. So in this way, the names and forms always are subject to change. Every moment we are changing, but we are so much habituated with these changing habits. We take it for reality because of repeated feeling. The wheel of samsara, why it is called wheel? It is always changing. Samsara means the literal meaning also a scrolling object. Samsara, who scrolls on, not in one direction, always in different directions. So, samsara itself is a cause of ignorance. That is ignorance, because it is always changing in different directions. Literally meaning which is changeable. So, there is no samsara for a liberated sage. The wheel of samsara or the world process rotates on account of ignorance. How ignorance causes the rotation or change? How? Suppose your son, dear son, only one son, he is not present in your house, and you don't know, he has not informed anything to you. Will you be at rest? Where has gone my son? You want to search for him. You will go for search of him. Where will you look for him? Is there any point where you can find him? Because you are ignorant. Ignorant causes this manyness. You will go on searching this child in different places until and unless you find him, his presence, until you find him. Till then you will go on changing your search from place to place, isn't it? Whatever you don't know. Suppose you are searching for a word meaning in the dictionary. Can you get it all of a sudden? You have to change the pages. Then only you can find the exact word in an exact place. Unless you change, you cannot find the truth. And that's how this change veils the reality. Everywhere, in every aspect of our life, we are ever changing. That's how we are ever ignorant. We don't know anything. And we were talking of the perception, why it is false perception. The senses are contacted with the sense objects, the eyes with the form, sound with the ear. In this way, their respective objects are associated with, related with, and for a moment they are subject to change. So, whatever information they get from that contact, that is momentary and transitory. That is subject to change. That's how your perception is cause of your ignorance. It always changes. So we are always in a wheel which is changing, ever changing wheel, and that creates confusion. Suppose in a we see in this, he has removed it. Okay. When one blinks and it stops, and then other blinks and stops, then we see a motion in it. Don't you see it? If it goes on in this way, one blinks and stops, then the other blinks and stops. So we see the movements, but there is no movement. Everything is steadily fixed in one point. It creates some confusion. The movements creates confusion. Other example we say, Alal Chakra. Alal Chakra in a round circular wire or some iron rod. You tie up some cloth and put some kerosene or diesel on it, some petrol on it, and set fire. And if you go on rotating it, what do you see? What the other people see? It is a circular fire. It is not so, because it is circulating. So the seer sees it is a circular fire. Nothing is moving. Whereas one fire is rotating so speedily, it creates confusion. In this way, this wheel, which is always moving, it creates confusion. What is what? And that is called ignorance. The reality is not visible. And that is due to your faulty senses, and they contact with the object for a moment and then they change. Everything is changing, just as two fast trains are crossing each other in different directions, opposite directions. Confusion is naturally seen there. When you travel in the train, what happens when you see outside trees and other objects? They run fast behind. Who is running behind? Who is movable and who is just opposite we see. In this way, the whole world, whatever we see, everything is confusive because it hides the reality within itself. So, there is no sansara for a liberated sage. What is called liberation then? Liberated sage means one who has got to one pointed, say, mind or steadiness of his own self, that is called Supreme Self, which is not subject to change, ever constant, ever pure, ever it is eternal and free of all the changes. Any disease, of course, liberated says he goes beyond samsara, changing phenomena, and he is always steady, so he has all the knowledge, all the knowledge. Say other example we can see also. A car is moving in the foothills, in the forest, in a zigzag road. How far he can see his behind and ahead? How much he can see? He can see his past, which he has already left. about 100 meters, hardly. And ahead also it can see 100 meters, say, take it for granted. He cannot see 10 kilometers away and he cannot see 10 kilometers behind. Whereas a person who is standing on the high mountain peak, just above that mountain, he can see 50 kilometers, 100 kilometers at a glance because he is steady. He is not moving. He can see the past of the car and the future of the car at present. That's how a realized soul who is ever steady beyond all these changes, he sees everything at a glance, and at present for him there is no time, there is no past, there is no future, because he is ever steady. He is never changing. That is called reality, and all these moving aspects, they are called ignorance, which creates the confusion, delusion. There is no sansar for liberated sage because sansar is a moving aspect. He is ever steady, so he is beyond sansar. Any disease of the eye cannot in any way affect the sun, the deity presiding over the eye. Eyes change, but the sun never changes. The breaking of the pot will not in any way affect the ether or space in the pot. This example very often we give. When the empty pot, say earthen pot, somehow somebody by some stroke it is broken into pieces, what happens to the inside sky or ether? When the pot breaks, does it change? Because it is the subtlemost, unchangeable, it remains as it is. But the body, the formation or the demarcating lines of the body where it was seen, that is broken, that is gone. But the inner space has no change. In 3 periods of time, it sees no change. It remains as it is. It never merges in the outer sky. Nothing happens to it. That's how the declaration of Vedas, the authoritative knowledge, they say, Natasya pranan utkramante, the life of a liberated sage has no change. It remains as it is. And sometimes that to that extent it is seen. The body of physical body of the great souls, they disappear as it were. It never meets any death or anything. It remains as it is. It was visible, now it is invisible. Just as the wind is visible when the trees nod their heads, then only we think. When we touch it, then only we know what is wind. But really, the reality is something else. When it moves, then only it is understood as something. So when the prana, the body, the total formation of the individual, the liberated sage has no change, then it becomes invisible. When the wind is not felt, it is invisible. When it moves, then only we see it is moving, it is wind. Any disease of the eye cannot in any way affect the sun. The deity presiding over the eyes. The breaking of the pot will not in any way affect the ether of the or the space in the pot. The water of the mirage cannot render the earth moist. It cannot have any effect on the moisture or the humidity of the earth, because it is not there. Even so, ignorance and its effects cannot in the least affect the pure, subtle, attributeless, formless, limbless, partless, and self-luminous Kshetrajna or the self. Just as I just now told, the man sitting on the height of the mountain, which is ever constant, he never moves, never changes. He is the witness of movements of the driver of a car moving in the foothills. Similarly, this liberated soul or one-pointed knowledge, experience, that is witness of all these changing phenomena of the world. He sees everything at a time, at present. That is called Kshetrajna. That kind of knowledge one obtains when he merges. We have to say for expression's sake, but there is no merging, nor becoming, nor uniting. Nothing happens there. It remains as it is. To express, we have to use some words. That's how we say the individual self unites with the Supreme. That is not so. It is just to express something haphazardly. So the Kshetrajna is always self-luminous. He knows everything, so it is not dependent on knowing it. Just as the lamp doesn't depend upon other lamp to be seen. You don't use your torchlight to see the sun. That is called self-effulgent. It is self-luminous. That's how it is called Kshetrajna, one who knows all the bodies, changing bodies, and the whole world as one. Ignorance does not touch the self. This type of knowledge or experience or oneness or non-changing aspect is known as Kshetrajna. Such knowledge the devotee attains. In one sloka he has given all the meaning, and yet Lord Krishna will go on explaining further, bit by bit. We shall see tomorrow. Tat kshetram yaccha jadrikcha yad vikari yatascha yat sacha yo yat prabhavascha tat samasena me shrunu. How it changes and how it takes the other form. What are the changes it undergoes? How the changes are occurred? All these in short I shall explain you, Arjuna. Tomorrow we shall see how these changes happen. Of course, a little we have already discussed. In little more clear way we shall see tomorrow. And further also, all the details we shall see in short. Details in short. Hari Om Purnamadaha Purnamidam Purnata Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevamasisyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Sadguru Bhagavan ki jai. Satchidananda Bhagavan ki jai. Krishna Bhagavan ki jai. Gita Mata ki jai.